Thanks, Jake. I just want to add something as well as Jacob, you mentioned Mark. This is the confounding thing about this whole dynamic is that, in the growth of lenses, you have Steve Sellers fending off all sorts of pressure as lenses was growing early on. Call him an early adopter. He came through lenses in Lexington, Kentucky with his wife. I'd say 98% of the former U.S. leadership team came through lenses. And so to give, again, because AI is somewhat limited, there's a broad exposure of lenses to the higher reaches of crew leadership. And so in the context in which this is happening, of course, the enemy is having a field day, but it's almost a conflict not a conflict, but a true dilemma, because there has been championing and there has been sponsorship and there has been participation, be it Steve Douglas or Steve Sellers, etc. And Mark's, taking the baby out of the dock, so to speak. So it's very important for us, and Laura, you were asking this question earlier, and Dr. Rochester, you said it later, you are leaders. Lead. We have enough. Jacob, you're demonstrating that. Others on the call, you're demonstrating that. The Lord allowed things to happen in the past to get us to where we are now, but not to stop. The kingdom work is not simply, the lenses was a tool that God used in this U.S. context. But the work doesn't stop, family. The work does not stop. At least that's the way I read John 17. That's our greatest tool for witnessing. And so let's not let that happen. And I just want to share that as a broader context that provides a bit of the complexity of where we are now.
About 4 years ago, Crew Leadership and Lenses Leadership began a series of conversations about lenses and what could be a better place in the organization of Crew for it to flourish. Why would this conversation be taking place? Well, number one, lenses had become wildly successful. And a program that started in Athletes in Action, from my vantage point, had begun to outgrow the sponsorship that Athletes in Action could give it. Lenses was being used across the organization and in a couple countries around the world. This conversation began 4 years ago. At the same time, Crew initiated and launched a new office called Oneness and Diversity. They asked Daryl and Gwen Smith to be co-executive directors of Oneness and Diversity. And it was the desire of Crew leadership to have more of a cohesive, unified voice within Oneness and Diversity within Crew. So this conversation started 4 years ago, prior to a significant leadership change from Steve Sellers to Mark Gauthier, prior to the formation of an SCU group. This was a conversation about organizational design and greater effectiveness for lenses.
Michael, this is Ethan.
Yep.
Can you is it possible to unpack the nature of the audit that you mentioned?
Sure.
It's the first time I've heard about that, but I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm probably not the only one. Can you open that door a little bit and shed some light on the nature of that and what was that about?
Sure. I'll give you a 15,000 foot dusting. So at the at the advent of the document, the SCU document, there were some concerns placed on lenses that perhaps we were engaging in some mission drift, perhaps some CRT and some Marxist ideology. This was also at the there was a frequent, I would say that there was a frequent incursion of those outside of Crew questioning lenses as a direct result of SCU behavior. Okay. All right. So these questions are coming up. And the confluence is, Gauthier becomes the president of Crew US, and it was decided that we need to look into lenses and audit lenses, which we were very. It was a curious decision, but we were very welcoming to it because and also that we were promoting anti-biblical teaching. So we were very open to that, and again, it was a bit curious. We were open to that. Mark Householder led that effort, put together a panel of people to be a part of the process, and we met a few times over that. The trajectory of the audit moved from an audit to a desire to reimagine lenses, a reimagining of lenses, which then moved to a desire to pause lenses. And so all that's between a November, December of 2020 and a July of 2021. All of that happened within that framework. In the midst of that, you have, I'll just leave it there. So that's what the audit is. That's what the audit was, and that's how it evolved and moved to where it was.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It sounds like it started as one thing and morphed into another. Is that an oversimplification?
No, I think that simplification is appropriate. And the matter of and just to make sure this is clear, the matter of oneness and diversity did not even enter our discussion as an executive team relative to the closure. That wasn't even part of the discussion ever.
In July of this year, 2021, what had been from my perspective, a clearly stated intention as a result of these numerous meetings between Crew leadership and Lenses leadership, that Lenses be transplanted to another place in the organization, to have stronger sponsorship across the whole organization, to be better integrated, and to help achieve a common voice. The stated intention over the past 4 years became a clear decision. And that decision was to move Lenses into oneness and diversity. So that decision, as well as other factors that I've noted previously, resulted in the Lenses executive team making the decision to close. I would go back to Colin's question. It goes back to what I felt was discussions between Crew leadership and Lenses leadership, and what was a 4-year or so clearly communicated intent on behalf of Crew leadership to transplant Lenses to a different part of the organization for the reasons I've already mentioned. But in that 4 to 5 year period, and I've owned a piece of not exerting more influence and being more clear, but in essence allowing Lenses to really the train had left the AIA station and it had been wildly successful, and had exceeded what I believe was my leadership scope, to serve it and to sponsor it and to resource it, in a number of different ways. But there was an allowance made, during that four-year period. So I think to remain in AIA, I guess I put it this way: the reality of where we are now, in terms of the lens's scope and influence, the issues that have come to the surface in this cultural climate are significantly different than they were 10 years ago. Because of all that, I don't think there's any realistic way for lenses to stay within Athletes in Action, when it has such a broad platform within Crew.
Right. Yes. My wife was saying like a training or something. Is there something like that in the works for the future for those that won't be able to participate in lenses? And if so, I was just wondering when that may take place. Thank you.
I believe in this period of transition. So I think there's a Daryl and Gwen piece to this. Daryl and Gwen, out of Oneness and Diversity with Crew, will initiate something at some time relative to this.
In the Christianity Today article, it quotes or paraphrases Mark Gauthier as saying that Crew is expected to release a robust document addressing Crew's theological structure in the coming months. Do you know, is that an accurate statement? Is that something that we can be expecting to see, or was that just a reporter's line?
No. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. That is a real document, and it is a real, call it a piece of work, because it is a piece of work. Let me just build some context here. 2 years ago, if you go to the Crew website, I think there was a pull down, Oneness and Diversity. There was maybe 3 paragraphs describing oneness and diversity on the Crew website. That proved to be extremely inadequate to help guide us through some of these cultural moments that we're in. And so, headed up by Keith Johnson, who heads theological studies, Keith began to put together a documentation that would be far more robust and more sufficient for us to think about our missionary call in the midst of this environment, and particularly the gospel related to justice, the gospel related to ethics. Maybe you've heard about the side A, side B way of thinking about things. So that document has been approved by the board of directors. It'll be a document that Daryl and Gwen will utilize as part of them moving forward with Oneness and Diversity in Crew.
A lot of feedback was given to the original statement that was put out that was not heeded. That's why the current statement that's on the Oneness and Diversity website is inadequate and insufficient, needing an update now. So I just want to name that. That's a little bit of the history behind that. A number of us gave feedback, very direct, specific feedback on that first draft, and it, did not go through. And I want to also add, Rasul Berry was working on that with Keith originally, and for those who don't know, Rasul left staff back in February, and so I'm not sure how much of his influence has remained, but Rasul was a much needed voice into shaping, talk about some of the theological framework and whatnot with regards to oneness and diversity. So I don't know what that will look like coming forward, and the board giving some input on that as well. So that's some other nuggets I think are important to know, and whatever will come out. Again, not knowing how much influence people like Rasul and even Ed may fully have on that, but there is input there. Again, narratives are important, words are important. So when Lenz's leadership is mentioned, I think it's important to just share, that means Michael. Our Lenz's executive team was not included or engaged in much of the conversations and process. So while Michael did represent the executive director of the Lenses Group, we do function as a team and make decisions as a team. And so I've heard that a few times, so I just wanted to speak to that as well, because again, I think context is important. So I wanted to share that.